Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mei Leaf and I'm here to introduce our 2025 ceremonial matcha. Yes, it has finally landed. I'm going to be introducing this tea to you and explaining how this tea made it to the top of the pile in all of our blind tastings. Let me quickly scope this tea for you. This is season 17th of May 2025. The cultivar is the Saimi Dori cultivar, so this is a single cultivar matcha. It's not a blended matcha. Not that there's anything wrong with blended matchas. You can get great blended matchas. You can get terrible blended matchas. Similarly with single cultivar. But this is a single cultivar, Saimi Dori cultivar. This is from Uji in Kyoto in Japan, the traditional heritage, most experienced place for producing matcha. And whilst matcha is being produced in other provinces, great matcha is being produced in other provinces, I still think that Uji has the crown as the prefecture in Japan that produces generally the top quality matcha. And the picking and processing on this, I'm going to dive into in a little bit more detail as we describe the tea, as we get into it. But the quick pointers are this. The leaves made for this matcha were picked from 40-year-old Saimi Dori cultivar bushes, so well-established, mature tea bushes, full of character. The tea bushes were shaded for 25 days with shelf canresha shading. So that's where they construct shelving and they layer over material to shade out the sun. It's been processed as a tencha. If you want to know the whole processing of matcha, I'll stick a link in the description below where we visited Japan and you can see it all in action. So it's made into a tencha. So those are the finished sort of raw green tea leaves. It's then been crucially stored for a while to just round out the flavors and make sure that there's roundness and maturity in the flavor. And then it has been stone milled, very important that it is stone milled to keep the temperatures low so that you don't have any potential damage to color, taste, or the nutrition of the matcha. So that's the basic headlines of this matcha. I think it's very important that we point out that there is a worldwide shortage in matcha. This has been led by, internationally, outside of Japan, this huge social media boom of everyone talking about matcha. And whilst this is incredible for the tea industry in Japan, because it is reinvigorating the Japanese tea market, it does come with some downsides and some things that you need to look out for. So let's quickly talk about those before we dive into the tea. The first thing is that it's very hard for Japan to meet this worldwide surge in popularity. I mean, we're talking about multiple factors of increased demand in matcha. And that is primarily because of a couple of reasons. The first is that climate changes and weather has meant that maintaining yield has become difficult over recent years. So that's one factor. But I think the bigger factor is that over the past 10 years, Japanese tea production in general has dropped. And that is because there have been tens of thousands of tea farmers that have retired and abandoned their tea fields and abandoned production, with less and less young people wanting to take up the hard life of becoming a tea farmer and becoming a tea producer. Now, this is primarily, I think, driven by the fact that there wasn't enough excitement in Japanese tea. And that's why I was talking about it in videos 5 years ago, how we need to reinvigorate the market. And that's why, it's great that there has been this incredible interest in matcha, because it means that there is now more motivation for the younger generations to take up these fields and start to produce matcha. But of course, there is a big catch-up process to now do. You can't just, magically turn the production back on. These abandoned fields need to be resurrected. The farmers need to learn the skills, etc. That's going to take years and years and years. Also, you've got to bear in mind that matcha, good matcha, comes from older tea plants. And you can't even start making matcha from any tea bushes that are under, I would say, about 5 years old. So even if they're planting seedlings now, it's going to be 5 years before we can actually start to produce any kind of matcha, and the matcha is not going to be that great. And so these are the fallouts, because the Japanese agencies, the Japanese government are trying to reinvigorate the matcha and support matcha production. They recognize that suddenly there's this huge worldwide demand for a product which is distinctly Japanese, even though originally it comes from China, but it's a subject for another discussion. You know, that I can hear people saying matcha, ground tea, powderized, micronized tea originally started in China. Anyway, the point is that they're trying to increase the yield of this heritage product. But by doing so, there are some pointers that you need to look out for, because more and more matcha is on the market and is going to hit the market, which is not what I would describe as top quality, top shelf matcha. First of all, like I said, it's going to be made from younger tea plants. So because younger tea plants, first of all, they're growing them, so you know that means they can pick them, but also younger tea plants just generally produce more yield than older tea plants. The younger plants grow quicker. So you're going to have younger bushes, have less memory, have less history, have less experience, produce less characterful teas in general. And you're going to have to try to increase that character through fertilization. And there is more and more of a trend, I think, of just trying to pump the earth with fertilization to try to increase the speed of growth of these seedlings and also increase the yield and the taste of the matcha. There's also more movement towards mechanization in terms of the whole, you know, cultivation, picking and processing of the matcha. So you're going to see more and more matcha that is coming out that's more machine made. I mean, there's always been some level of mechanization within the matcha industry, but more and more of that is going to happen. Also, the way that the tea plant is shaded, because they're trying to grow more and more bushes to produce matcha. They want to grow it, but they're going to have to use direct shading, which means they're covering the tea bushes with blankets, and that produces I would say, overall lower quality matcha. Let's get into this. Why is this 2025 ceremonial matcha not as vibrant poppy green as you see on your TikTok stream or your Instagram feeds? Well, first of all, why do we care about shade-grown tea? Matcha should be coming from shade-grown bushes, because when you shade grow the tea, the leaf reacts to the lack of sunlight and produces more L-theanine, which gives you that beautiful umami taste, the rounded flavor, and also this calm invigoration, which is so sought after with matcha. But there are different ways of shading the plant. The most basic way to do it is to do this direct covering of the bushes just with material. What happens there is that you're going to get the shading, but because the plant doesn't have any room to grow and doesn't really have much air to breathe, it doesn't produce matcha of the same character of flavor. Now you can see here in front of me, this is another shade-grown matcha that is direct shaded. And you can see that it is more poppy green. When you have shelf-shaded matcha, so they've constructed shelving with material over, that gives the tea bushes more space to grow and to breathe, and it produces better flavor matcha, but is, ironically, less green in color. The second factor that affects the color quite dramatically is the cultivar. This is from the Saimidori cultivar, which is just a cultivar of plant which is less green than, for example, the Okumidori cultivar, which is very deep green. So the color of matcha, of course, is very, very important. You want to know that it's shade grown, so you want to see a vibrant green, but don't be put off by matcha like this, which is less vibrant than you may see all over your feeds out there. So this direct shade growing, which is very was less of a common thing in matcha production in Japan, is a technique which is more and more going to be used in Japan because it's just much easier than trying to construct all of this shelving around the bushes that are growing as they try to ramp up the yield of matcha. So takeaways are, it's great that everyone is drinking matcha. It's reinvigorating the Japanese tea industry. However, it's going to take a long time for Japan to catch up with demand due to the reasons I've spoken about before. And there is going to be more and more matcha hitting the market, which is going to look very green, very bright, very poppy, but may not have the same level of richness of character if it has just been produced for yield and for color. So always, always, always judge the matcha by taste, aroma, and experience. Speaking of which, let's get stuck in to this one here. Right, I'm gonna just put some hot water in this bowl and pour it out here. And then we're gonna put, this is nearly 5 grams of the Saimidori matcha into this bowl. Right, let's have a sniff. And I've done videos about how to get the most out of your matcha experience. I'll put links in the description below. I can already smell this creamy, comforting, warming note coming through this matcha. And the Saimidori cultivar is one of my favorite cultivars if I want that really comforting, rich, rounded profile in my tea. I'm getting warm milk, malted, just warm malted milk. I'm getting peanut butter. I'm getting like, I was going to say cream cheese frosting, but it's more like like a milk chocolate cream cheese frosting. It's so warming. Let's see if I can get that in focus. It's so warming. It's so comforting. There's also like walnut cake, and there is a slight coconut note to it as well. Right, let's just put a little bit of water in here. And we're gonna make a little paste without doing any frothing. This is sort of basically like a koicha. And take your time so that you keep blending until you get everything from the sides and you see that the actual koicha paste looks smooth like this. Okay, here we go. Smell, oh, peanut butter. Hazelnut butter, no, it's peanut butter. But there's this distinct brothiness, umami brothiness. This is a properly 25-day shade-grown tea. Again, because it's Saimidori and it's shelf, it may not have the pop of certain matchas, but you can smell the shade-grown smell in there, umami rich. There's also a little bright note of green melon, including the melon rind, including the melon skin, a little pepperiness. Okay, I'm sort of eyeballing this. So just lift that paste into the water to make a little suspension before you start whisking. To make your froth. And yes, and if everyone's saying your whisk is beaten up, you're right, I need to get a new whisk. It is a beaten up whisk. I'm kind of embarrassed to show it to you. I'm going to hide it immediately. Huh. All right, take a look at that beautiful froth. Let's give it a taste. Round, rich, smooth, comforting indulgence. Creamy, so creamy. Immediately your mouth is hit with umami, rounded, savory to sweet, brothy, but that works so well with chocolate, malt. I'm still getting that green melon after you've swallowed. But when it hits your mouth, it's savory, brothy, chocolatey, milky, creamy, touch of that coconut. And then after you swallow, green melon, star fruit, lotus flower, strawberry, softest bitterness, delightful, soft presence of bitterness that just dissipates into a cooling, juicy finish. But now I've swallowed another gulp of this matcha. I'll have to describe that finish a bit later. It is a supremely balanced matcha. The nuttiness of those peanut butters are there as well. Chocolate and roasted almonds. Yeah. I feel like I'm sipping on a very frothy hot chocolate, but just dial down the chocolate so it's in the background with nuts, and then bring in the brothy umami and the milkiness. Amazing, right? What's the finish like? Strawberries in the finish when you breathe out through the nose. A cool, juicy strawberry finish. Wow, you know, a few sips and I just feel a little tingle as the matcha starts to do its work. This is koicha level matcha. What do I mean by that? Is you could just drink that paste and it is so supremely luxuriously rounded with so little bitterness and astringency that you would just, it would be strong, but it would be really, really enjoyable, and you'd pick up even more nuances in the taste. It's also perfect for an usucha like this. And whisper it quietly. It still would be, it would make a very luxurious latte or flat matcha or whatever milky concoction you want to make. A lot of people say to me, oh, don't promote this really high-end matcha for those kinds of drinks. You know, they can use culinary grade matcha, or we can use culinary grade matcha. I tend to disagree. I think that when you use culinary grade matcha, you can taste it. And if I'm going to make myself a beautiful milk matcha, I still want to use the best matcha that I can get. Let's smell the empty bowl. Oh, fudge. Fudge and oats with a touch of strawberry. There you go, quick video. We needed to do this. I wanted to showcase this 2025 Saimidori matcha. I hope that if you pick it up, you enjoy it. It has been a while coming. I know a lot of people have been writing to me saying, when's it in stock? When's it in stock? It has just dropped. We've had a small batch by air. More is coming by sea. But if you want to secure your batch, then I would act quicker. We've got quite a bit, but I would act a little bit quicker. And I hope that this has given you some pointers to look out for as we traverse the next few years, 5, maybe even 10 years of trying to work out the evolution of matcha and how Japan responds to this incredible trend towards matcha. And of course, inevitably, and I also think it would be positive, other countries are going to jump on board to bring in their own matcha and try and compete for this ever-growing market. That's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you're in the world by browsing meileaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mei Leaf. Thank you for being part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep drinking the sublime stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.